The hidden truth. The night was quiet, yet there was a certain tension in the air, the kind of silence that almost feels like it is waiting to break. Keanu Reeves walked alone through the dim corridor of an old studio building in Los Angeles. He had just finished a long day, one filled with interviews, meetings, and the endless noise that often came with fame. But now in this quiet place he thought no one was watching him. He thought he could finally let the mask slip. His footsteps echoed against the polished floor, steady and calm. But inside his heart carried a storm. People always saw Keanu as the strong one, the humble one, the man who smiled gently even when his eyes carried a weight that very few could understand. Tonight that weight pressed heavier than ever. He entered a small side room, a place barely anyone used anymore, where an old piano stood in the corner covered in dust. He closed the door softly behind him. His fingers trembled slightly as he touched the keys, brushing the dust away. Then, almost in a whisper, he began to play. The notes were not perfect, but they were full of something raw, something honest. Sadness, longing, resilience, hope. Every chord carried the truth of his life. In this private moment, away from cameras, away from the crowd, Keanu was not the Hollywood star. He was just a man who had lost, who had endured, and who still tried to find light in the darkness. What he did not know was that someone had seen him. Sandra Bullock, who had been walking the same hallway after finishing her own late meeting, had paused when she heard the faint sound of music. She followed it quietly, almost holding her breath. When she reached the slightly open door, she froze. There in the dim glow of the old studio lights was Keanu, his head bowed low, his hands moving gently across the piano, his face carrying a pain so human, so fragile, that Sandra felt her heart tighten. She had known Keanu for years. They had shared laughs, shared secrets, even shared silence in a way only true friends could. But she had never seen this side of him. The world saw strength and kindness, but here was a man who carried broken pieces within him. Pieces he rarely let anyone touch. She stayed in the shadows, not wanting to intrude, yet unable to turn away. As the song faded, Keanu closed his eyes. A long breath escaped his lips, like a man releasing a truth he had kept locked inside. He whispered something softly, words so faint that Sandra almost missed them. "I just hope I am enough. Not for the world. Just for the people I love." The words struck her like thunder. Sandra had always admired his humility. But this was different. It was vulnerability laid bare. She felt a sudden ache to step inside, to place a hand on his shoulder, to tell him that he was more than enough. Yet something stopped her. Maybe it was respect for his private moment. Or maybe it was fear. Fear of changing the fragile honesty that had spilled out without him knowing anyone was there. But fate has a way of forcing truths into the open. The old door creaked slightly under her weight as she shifted. Keanu's hand stilled on the piano. His head lifted, and for a second their eyes met through the dim crack in the doorway. Silence filled the air once more. But this time it was different. Keanu knew he had been seen. Sandra knew she had stepped into a part of his soul he had never meant to share. Her heart pounded. Should she speak or should she walk away? Keanu's lips curved into the faintest smile, though his eyes still carried the storm. "You saw that, didn't you?" he said softly, not with anger, but with quiet acceptance. Sandra hesitated, then slowly stepped inside, her voice gentle. "I didn't mean to, but yes, I did." The room felt smaller now, the air heavier with unspoken truths. She walked closer, her gaze never leaving his. "Keanu," she whispered, "why do you always carry this pain alone?" His eyes lowered again, his hands still resting on the keys. "Because people expect me to be strong. They expect kindness, calm, hope. But if they saw the cracks, maybe they wouldn't believe anymore." Her chest tightened. "You don't have to hide. Not from me." Keanu's breath shook slightly, and for a moment he said nothing. Then finally his voice broke the silence. "Maybe that's why you were the one who found me tonight." In that instant, Sandra felt a shift, a fragile thread weaving between them, stronger than friendship, deeper than words. This was not a performance. This was real. And yet what neither of them knew was that this secret moment, caught by accident, would change everything. It would test their bond, shake the walls they had built around their hearts, and lead them down a path neither of them had expected. Because sometimes, the most powerful truths are revealed not when we plan them, but when we are caught in the silence, when the mask falls, and someone we trust is standing right there to see it. And Sandra Bullock had just seen the truth Keanu Reeves never meant to show. The unspoken bond, the night after Sandra discovered Keanu's secret moment. She could not sleep. The image of him sitting alone at the piano, pouring his soul into the quiet keys, replayed in her mind over and over. She had seen Keanu in many ways before. On red carpets, in interviews, at private dinners with friends, but never like that. Never so raw, never so vulnerable. It unsettled her, not because it weakened him, but because it revealed how much he had been carrying in silence. Sandra had always admired his strength, but now she realized strength was not just about standing tall in front of the world. Sometimes it was about surviving in silence when no one noticed, and that realization made her heart ache for him in a way she could not easily explain. The next day, she arrived at the set early, hoping to see him, but Keanu was already there, sitting quietly in a corner with a book in his hands. He looked calm, his usual gentle self, as if the night before had never happened. His smile was soft when he looked up at her, but she noticed the flicker in his eyes, a tiny shadow that told her he knew she had seen something he rarely shared. "Morning," he said simply, his voice warm. "Morning," she replied, hesitating before sitting down beside him. For a while, neither spoke. The air between them was filled with words unsaid, as if both were waiting for the other to open the door. Finally, Sandra decided she could not let it slip into silence. "About last night," she began gently. "I hope I didn't intrude." Keanu closed the book slowly, his gaze turning thoughtful. "You didn't intrude," he said after a pause. Maybe it was time someone saw that side of me." She studied him, his calm face hiding so much beneath the surface. "Keanu, why do you always keep so much locked inside? Don't you ever want to let someone in?" He leaned back, his eyes drifting toward the window. The morning light framed him, softening the hard lines of his face. "Sometimes I think about it," he admitted. "But then I remember all the people who left. The people who couldn't stay. And I tell myself it's safer to keep it inside. Safer not to ask for more than what life has already given me." His words hit her harder than she expected. She knew his history, the tragedies he had endured, the losses, the loneliness. But hearing it in his voice, hearing how much he believed he had to protect others from his pain, it broke something inside her. "You don't have to carry everything alone," she said softly. "You've always been there for others. Don't you think you deserve someone to be there for you too?" Keanu looked at her then, his gaze steady, almost searching. "Do you really believe that, Sandra?" Her throat tightened, but she nodded. "Yes, I do. More than anything." For the first time, his calm composure cracked. A small smile curved his lips, but there was sadness behind it. "Then maybe I've been wrong all this time," he whispered. The moment stretched between them, fragile yet powerful. Neither said more, but something had shifted. Sandra could feel it, an invisible bond forming, unspoken but undeniable. Later that afternoon, as they worked together on set, Sandra noticed Keanu watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, not with the gaze of a co-star, but with the quiet attention of someone who had just allowed a piece of his heart to be seen. It unsettled her, yet it warmed her at the same time. That evening, when the crew wrapped up, Keanu offered to walk her to her car. The night air was cool, the city alive with its usual noise, but between them there was a calm silence. Halfway to the lot, Sandra asked, "Do you still play the piano when no one's around?" He chuckled softly, his eyes crinkling. "Sometimes. It helps me breathe when the world feels too heavy." She smiled gently. "Then maybe next time. You shouldn't play alone." His steps slowed, and he looked at her with quiet surprise. "You'd want that?" Her answer was simple, but her voice carried the weight of sincerity. "Yes, because sometimes music is meant to be shared." Keanu said nothing for a moment, but the gratitude in his eyes spoke volumes. He nodded slowly. "Then, next time it won't be just me." What neither of them realized was that this promise, made so simply under the glow of the parking lot lights, would soon reveal truths neither of them had been ready to face. Because when two hearts begin to open, secrets have a way of rising to the surface, and not all secrets stay hidden forever. The secret that followed them days passed, but the memory of that quiet promise lingered in both their hearts. Sandra found herself thinking about it at odd times, while reading scripts, while laughing with friends, even while sitting in silence. She had always known Keanu was kind, thoughtful, and resilient, but now she saw him differently. She saw the hidden layers, the quiet storm beneath his calm surface. Keanu, too, carried the memory with him. His life was often filled with noise. Directors giving instructions, reporters asking endless questions, strangers reaching for him in public. Yet in the middle of all that chaos, he kept returning to one moment. Sandra's words, "Sometimes music is meant to be shared." It had struck something deep within him, something he could not shake. Finally, one evening he decided to keep his promise. After work he found Sandra in the hallway holding her bag and preparing to leave. His voice was quiet but steady. "Do you have a little time tonight?" Her eyes lifted, curious. "For what?" He gave a small, almost shy smile. "To hear the music." Sandra paused, then nodded softly. "Yes, I'd like that." They walked together back to that same forgotten room, the old studio space with the dust-covered piano. The moment they stepped inside, it felt different. The silence no longer felt lonely. It felt alive. Keanu sat at the piano, his fingers brushing over the keys. He glanced at her and she nodded, encouraging him. The first notes filled the air, soft and trembling, then slowly growing stronger. Sandra closed her eyes, letting the music wrap around her like a warm blanket. It was not just sound. It was a story, a confession, a cry from a soul that had carried too much. When she opened her eyes again, she saw Keanu differently. He wasn't just playing. He was speaking without words. She walked closer, her presence steady beside him, and then, without planning it, her hand rested gently on his shoulder. He froze for just a second, then continued, his music deepening. The connection between them was undeniable. But then something unexpected happened. The door creaked again, louder this time, and someone stepped inside. It was a young assistant from the crew carrying paperwork. The assistant's eyes widened when they saw the scene. Keanu at the piano, Sandra standing close beside him, her hand on his shoulder, both of them wrapped in a private moment that felt far too intimate for anyone else to witness. The assistant stammered an apology and quickly left, but the silence that followed was heavy. Sandra pulled her hand back slowly. "Keanu, what if people start talking?" He gave a faint sigh, his eyes still on the piano keys. "They already talk, Sandra. About everything. About nothing. I've learned you can't stop it." She studied him carefully. "But this feels different. It's not just a rumor. It's something real." Keanu finally lifted his gaze, meeting hers. "Then let them talk. The truth is, I don't care what the world thinks. I only care about what you think." His words hit her like a sudden storm. Her heart raced, her breath caught in her throat. She had always known Keanu to be sincere, but hearing those words, so honest, so direct, made her feel vulnerable in a way she hadn't expected. Before she could respond, he stood and gently closed the piano lid. "But maybe we should be careful, not because I'm afraid of what people will say, but because I don't want them to twist something meaningful into something cheap." Sandra nodded slowly. "I understand." Yet, as they left the room together, she couldn't shake the thought that their private world had just been cracked open. One small interruption, one pair of curious eyes, and everything had shifted. And indeed, the very next morning, whispers began on set. A few crew members glanced too long. Conversation stopped when they walked into the room. Sandra felt it, the silent speculation building like smoke. And though Keanu remained calm, she could sense the tension growing around them. One evening, after a long day, she confronted him. "Keanu, I don't want this to hurt you. If the rumors grow, if the press finds out..." He stopped her gently, his voice low but firm. "Sandra, do you really think the world's opinion matters more than what we share?" Her lips parted, but no answer came, because deep inside she already knew the truth. Still, neither of them realized that the whispers were only the beginning. A storm was forming outside their walls. A storm that would test not only their bond but also the very core of who they were. The storm of whispers, the days that followed, became heavier than either of them had expected. On the surface, everything looked normal. Keanu and Sandra continued working on set, delivering their lines, laughing in between takes, showing the same professionalism they always had. But beneath the calm, whispers spread like wildfire. A few crew members had noticed the way Sandra's eyes lingered on Keanu, or the way his smile softened only when directed at her. Others remembered the assistant who had stumbled into that private room and left with wide eyes and hurried footsteps. Soon, small fragments of speculation grew into a quiet storm. "Did you see them last night? They left together again. I swear I heard music playing when they were alone. Maybe they've been more than friends all along." The rumors rolled through the hallways like smoke, curling under closed doors, impossible to contain. And though neither Keanu nor Sandra spoke of it aloud, both could feel the shift in the air whenever they entered a room. People's glances lingered longer. Conversations paused too suddenly. One evening, after a long day, Sandra found herself sitting in her trailer, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed unsettled, uncertain. She whispered to herself, "Why does it matter so much? Why am I afraid?" She had built her life on strength and independence. She had faced the glare of Hollywood before, had survived the endless gossip and false headlines. But this time it was different. This time it wasn't just about her, it was about him. She feared that Keanu, with his gentle soul and quiet dignity, would once again be forced under the harsh light of a world that never let him rest. A knock on the door startled her. "It's me," came Keanu's calm voice. She opened the door, and there he stood, carrying his usual quiet presence that always seemed to steady her heart. He stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. "You've been quiet," he said, his eyes searching hers. "Because everyone else hasn't been," she replied with a sigh. He nodded slowly, as if he already knew what she meant. "The whispers? They're everywhere, Keanu. I can feel it. And I hate it. I hate that something so private, so meaningful is being turned into gossip." He walked closer, his gaze gentle but firm. "Sandra, let me ask you this. Do you regret what we've shared?" Her chest tightened. "No, never." "Then nothing else matters," he said quietly. She wanted to believe him, but fear still clung to her. "But what if they twist it? What if they use it to hurt you? You've already been through so much. I don't want to be another reason for the world to pry into your life." His expression softened even more. "Sandra, people will always twist the truth. But do you know what I've learned? It only has power if we let it. We can't control the storm, but we can choose how we walk through it." His words washed over her like a bomb, but before she could respond, her phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up and froze. It was a message from her manager. "Call me. There's a story spreading." Tabloids already sniffing around. Her stomach dropped. She looked at Keanu, her voice trembling. "It's already out there." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Keanu reached out, gently taking the phone from her hand and setting it aside. "Then let it be out there. What's the worst they can say? That we care about each other? That we share a bond?" Sandra's voice shook. "They'll make it more than that." "They'll dig, they'll speculate, they'll do what they always do," he interrupted softly. "But Sandra, I don't live for them. I live for the people who truly matter, and right now, that's you." Her eyes burned with tears she hadn't expected. She turned away, but Keanu gently touched her arm, grounding her. "Don't let fear decide what we are," he whispered. She looked at him, her heart pounding. And in that moment she realized something. He wasn't just her friend anymore. He was the anchor she didn't know she needed, the one person who could quiet the storm inside her. But even as they stood there, a truth remained. The outside world was no longer blind. The storm had begun, and it would not stop. And somewhere beyond those walls, a headline was already being written, one that would drag their private bond into the harsh light of the world. When the world intruded, the morning came with headlines splashed across gossip sites and entertainment magazines. Sandra woke up to the blinding light of her phone screen, filled with notifications. Words like secret romance, caught in the moment, and intimate piano night screamed at her from every corner of the media. Blurry photos of her and Keanu leaving the set together, shadows of their closeness, even fabricated quotes filled the pages. She felt her chest tighten. It wasn't just whispers anymore, it was everywhere. Her phone rang. Her manager's voice was sharp, filled with worry. "Sandra, this is blowing up. They're calling for comments. If we don't handle this right, it could spin out of control." Sandra listened, but her mind drifted. She thought of Keanu, thought of his gentle smile, his quiet strength. She knew this was the very storm he had warned about, the storm that would twist something pure into something cheap. She drove to set with a heavy heart, cameras already flashing outside the gates. Reporters shouted questions, their voices colliding into chaos. "Sandra, are you and Keanu in love? Is this just a friendship or more? How long have you been hiding this?" The questions stabbed at her, but she kept walking, her face calm though her hands trembled. Inside, she found Keanu sitting quietly, as though the noise outside could not touch him. His posture was steady, but when he looked up at her, she saw the flicker of pain in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. "It started," she whispered. "I know," he replied softly. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice breaking. He paused, then said with a calmness that felt unshakable, "We live our truth." But living the truth was not as easy as speaking it. Over the next few days, the storm only grew. Paparazzi followed their every move. Journalists dug into their pasts, twisting old interviews into new meanings. Talk shows debated whether their bond was real or a publicity stunt. Even people they thought were friends gave careless quotes to the press, fueling the fire. Sandra began to feel suffocated. One night, she sat alone in her living room, staring at the headlines on TV. Her phone buzzed with texts from friends, some supportive, others curious. Her heart ached. Then a knock at her door. She opened it to find Keanu standing there, holding nothing but a quiet resolve. "I thought you might need someone tonight," he said gently. Without a word, she stepped aside and let him in. They sat together in the dim light of her living room, silence stretching between them. Finally, Sandra whispered, "I don't know if I can take this, Keanu. It's too much. The lies, the eyes on us, the way they're twisting everything." He turned to her, his gaze steady. "Then let me carry some of it with you." Her eyes filled with tears. "You've already carried so much in your life. Why would you take this too?" His voice was soft, but there was no hesitation. "Because you matter to me. Because what we share matters. And because I'd rather face 1,000 storms than lose something real." Her heart broke and healed at the same time. She leaned into him, her head against his shoulder, and for the first time in days she felt the world quiet down. Yet even in that moment of peace, they both knew the storm wasn't finished. The media had tasted blood and they would not let go so easily. And then came the unexpected twist. Someone close to them, someone they trusted, leaked a private detail, one that only the two of them had shared. When Sandra read the headline the next morning, her hand shook. It wasn't just about them being seen together anymore. It was about the piano room, about the secret night when she had walked in on him, about his whispered words that were never meant for anyone else. Her breath caught. "They know," she whispered in disbelief. They know about that night. She realized then, it wasn't just gossip anymore. It was betrayal. The choice that changed everything. The headline was everywhere. Sandra Bullock caught Keanu Reeves in a secret moment. The story described the piano, the dim room, even his whispered words. It was too detailed to be a rumor. It had come from someone close, someone who had been there or had heard it from them. Sandra felt her chest tighten as she read, every sentence cutting deeper. This moment that had been sacred was now turned into spectacle. She paced her living room, anger and sorrow battling inside her. Who would do this? Who would betray something so private? When Keanu arrived later that evening, she could see the weight on his face too. His calm presence was still there, but his eyes held the sadness of a man who had been forced to bleed in front of the world. "They've taken it," Sandra whispered, her voice breaking. "They've taken the one moment that was only ours and they've put it on display for everyone to tear apart." Keanu stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "Yes, they have. But they can't change what it really was. They can't touch the truth of what we shared." "But doesn't it hurt you?" she asked, her eyes shining with tears. "To know they're out there twisting it, mocking it." He paused, then gave a small, almost weary smile. "Of course it hurts. But Sandra, pain has followed me my whole life. I've learned something about it. It can either break you or it can teach you what matters most. And right now what matters most is you." Her tears spilled then, not from pain, but from the strength in his words. She realized something in that moment. He wasn't asking her to stand in the storm alone, nor was he asking to carry it all himself. He was asking them to stand together. "Then what do we do now?" she whispered. Keanu reached for her hand, his touch grounding her. "We make a choice. Either we let the world decide who we are or we decide for ourselves." The next day they walked together into the glare of flashing cameras, side by side. Reporters shouted questions. Microphones pushed forward, chaos swirling. But Keanu and Sandra didn't hide. They stood calmly, their hands brushing, their eyes steady. Keanu spoke first, his voice strong yet gentle. "The world has made stories about us, but here is the truth. What we share is real. It is not for headlines. It is not for gossip. It is simply two people finding connection in a noisy world." Sandra's voice followed, clear and unwavering. "We never planned to share this part of ourselves with the public. But since it has been taken, let us tell you this. Respect, kindness, and trust brought us here. And no amount of lies will change that." The cameras flashed harder, the questions grew louder, but something shifted. The narrative that had been fueled by gossip was suddenly confronted with sincerity, with honesty that no tabloid could twist. Later, away from the noise, Sandra turned to him. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but right now I feel like we finally took back our story. Keanu's eyes softened, his lips curving into that faint, humble smile she had grown to cherish. Yes, because the story was never theirs to tell. It was always ours, and in that quiet truth they found peace. The storm outside would rage again, as storms always do, but they had chosen to stand together. And that choice, simple, steady, unshakable, was the one thing no betrayal, no rumor, no headline could ever destroy.